Next up we have Layer Styles, and these are our blending modes. These are special effects that can be placed onto a layer. Now when we're looking at our Styles panel over here, there it is, these are the same effects. These are just preset sets of these different effects. You can find the Layer Styles right here. They're called blending options right there. Or you can find them right down here at the bottom where it says FX. Now you need to be on a layer, just like that. And that's right there. That's that option. I'm going to pull this panel up again a little bit. Click on that, and there you go. You can see the blending options right down there. I'm going to go a little higher on this so you can see that whole panel, the whole little drop down. There we go. It does all of these standard options. Now notice this is a shorter list than we have up in the menu, and again that holds true for most instances. You'll find more up in the menu than you will on the actual panel. In here, all of this stuff is shown in that one drop-down list on the panel. These are accessible by the little pop-out menu or right-clicking on the layer, and global light can be adjusted while you're inside of these, and you can show or hide effects when you're inside of the layers. So this stuff can be done in other places over here. You can access all that. It's just not always available right from the little drop-down list. Let's take a look at these blending modes, blending options, or layer styles or layer effects. Click on that, and that brings up the layer style dialog box. And in here we can add drop shadows, inner shadows, outer glow, inner glow, bevel and emboss, contours, satin text, and so forth. This stuff works on the layer, which means that these work on text, these work on your vector-based shapes, and these work on regular images as well. Now if you're working on an image, a lot of this stuff won't necessarily show if the image covers the whole page. Such as this water over here, it goes clear out to the edge. If you have it like that, a lot of the stuff is going to be working on the edges, so you wouldn't notice that. For instance, a drop shadow would be showing down here, down below this image, and of course that's outside of our picture area, so a drop shadow wouldn't do me any good. Outer glow is outside of the image, and again, same thing. So depending upon what you select in here, some of these things may not be visible if your image fills the whole picture like our water does here. Now the Canon has been cut out of the image, so we have transparency around the Canon, which means I can use a drop shadow. There's a little drop shadow effect. Let me just minimize that layer for a second. There's the drop shadow. I can do an inner shadowing in there. Outer glowing effect, just like that. An inner glowing that's glowing inside. Add a bevel and emboss effect. Contouring or a texture. Add a satiny effect onto this. We can overlay that with a color if I wanted to. Overlay it with a gradient if I wanted to. Or a pattern, just like that. Or a stroke. I should put a stroke around the image. This is kind of funny blobs down here. Those are little bits of the original image that I never erased, and I didn't spot until just now. So sometimes using the stroke will help you find little things you may want to go back in and clean up or erase. I'm not going to bother with that right now, though, since they don't really show anywhere on the picture. So this allows you to add in all these different effects on the actual layer. Each one of these has its own set of options. These are general options for all of the blending options. We can choose a blend mode and opacity. We have advanced blending in here. We can work with individual channels. We can work with knockouts if you need to. Blend interior effects as a group, blend clipped effects as a group, and so forth. Lots of options. Blend if, and we can choose a particular color here for blending as well. So it has some separate individual options to work with here to control how all of these work on that layer. When you're doing layer styles, you can do these different layer styles on different layers. Let's look at our drop shadow. Click on drop shadow, and here is the options for the drop shadow, and you can see it right down there. There's a preview button. I can show or hide the drop shadow just like that. We have a default angle here, and it says use global light. We saw the global light option as one of the options in the layer menu over here inside a little pop out right there. And what this does is it makes sure that every single layer uses the same lighting angle. Now you don't have to do that. Some of these things don't really depend upon lighting angle. Sometimes you may want to use different angles. You can control the angle here, either type in an angle or just grab this little bit here and pull the angle around. It looks like on this image the light's kind of coming down roughly from the top. Judging the look of the image here and the highlighting, maybe it's a little bit, the shadow's it's about halfway up. So it looks like the light is pretty well coming down right from the top. As you can see right there, it's pretty much just from the top, maybe back a little bit. So having the shadow pretty close to straight up would be the most realistic in here. We can control the distance of the shadow. You can see it moving in and out right there. The spread of the shadow and the size. The bigger it is, the softer it gets on shadows. All of these options have controls like this. You also can work with a quality contour. If you choose different contours in here, notice it's going to change the effect of the shape or of your shadow, whatever it is you're working on, depending upon the contour you choose. Some of these have very interesting effects. Some of them are not really that useful. The default is kind of a straight line in here. You can get more contours if you want to, or make new contours. You can choose to anti-alias the edge. That just smooths out the edge. You can increase noise. So there's a bit of noise added in there, or take noise out. And you can choose whether or not you want to have the layer knock out the drop shadow. And this is just something for printing. If you're going to a color separated printing, this will be working with that. Let's look at our inner shadow in here. Notice it is the same options for inner shadow. Let's just unselect that. Outer glow, different sets of options. Now on all of these, if you see a little spot like this little color rectangle, that means that you can change the color. Look at the outer glow. I'm going to increase the size of that a little bit and the spread a little bit so you can really see the outer glow happening now. There it is. You can change the color by clicking on the color here. Just choose a different color. Maybe I want to have this kind of a blue glow. Here's a bright blue glow. Or I can do a gradient as well and work for my gradients and use a gradient as a glow. So you can do some really interesting special effecty kind of things in here if you want to. That's kind of bizarre. Some may work out well, some may not. It depends upon what you're looking for. So even though it says outer glow, it has more available to it than just working with the outer glow. Now if you click on the gradient itself right here, this brings up the gradient editor. We'll be looking at this a little later on. You can actually make your own gradients. Let's go back to a color in here. We can work with some techniques, softer or precise on the element, spread and size, and again here's our contour quality. Let's just take a look at some differences in the contour there. Notice how it changes that effect. Let's just hide that one. Inner glow has similar options. In this case, the glow is inside the object, as you can see over there. Bevel and emboss actually bevels the edge of an object. And we've seen how satin adds a satiny effect and so forth. I'm going to do something else here. Let's just cancel that. Bring our layers up again. Let's make a new layer in here. I'll make a new layer above that layer. Let's hide the cannon and all this stuff. Hide that group, hide that. There we go. Hide the background cannon. And I'll hide that text. So I have layer 5. I'm going to make a shape in here, just an ellipse. I'll just draw it kind of like that. Just a basic ellipse. Let's now look at our blending options again. This is the layer styles. Put a drop shadow in. And you can see the drop shadow right down there at the bottom of that. Let's increase that distance so we can put drop shadows onto shapes as well. We can do inner shadowing on shapes. You can see it inside there. Little inner shadowing thing happening. I'll use that just for some softening of that edge. There we go. Kind of a a fun little trick, just giving me a little gradient kind of edge in there. Let's hide that. There we go. And the main reason I wanted to put in a basic shape here is to look at some of these options, bevel and emboss. These show up best on a shape. I'm going to hide that inner shadow. And let's make this a lot larger. There you go. You can really now see the bevel and emboss edge here. We're looking at an inner bevel. We're going to do outer bevel, which bevels outside and would show up on a background. Let's actually bring our background up here. So I need to close this down before I can do that. Let's just bring that back in a second, and let's show the water. There we go. Blending options back up again. Again, these are the layer styles from the layer menu. Bevel and emboss one more time. And there's the outer emboss. And you see how the outer emboss acts outside of the image. We can soften or harden that up. We can change the direction up or down right here. And we can go hard or softer or smooth. We have outer bevel, inner bevel. There's inner bevel hard edge, just like that. Inner bevel chisel soft edge. Increase the depth, increases the shading effect. Size increases your thickness. And soften can soften up the effect. So you have lots of controls in here to control all this stuff. You also can control the shading in here, the angle of your light. Just move that around. You can change the light angle just like that. Again, you can change the contour. Different contours will have different qualities of effect. It's kind of nice from there, actually. Always worth going in and trying these different settings. I'll put it back to the default setting. There are additional options here, additional contouring options. In here you actually can adjust the amount of contouring here. And so you can bring the contour in or out and soften up the edge a little bit depending upon the contour that you're working with. Texture places a texture into your shape. Let's look at our texture panel. In texture you can actually choose from different panels. You can scale the texture smaller, or you can go larger. You can change the depth of the texture so it's real soft. And notice that this has two sides. The left side is negative numbers, the right side is positive, and then right towards the middle is a pretty soft little texture. There we go. Almost a moon-like surface on that one. And these are all of the different textures available to us from our standard texture panel. See here, even though we're looking at a color, these both have color to them, they're only using the texture aspect of that. So I go through and find a different texture, whatever texture I wanted to use. And then play around with those different textures and adjust the texture and so forth. So that's the texture section on the bevel and emboss. Let's hide that. And I'll hide those two things. Satin allows us to put in a kind of a satiny effect. Again, you can choose a contour and you can choose a color for your satin. You see that's changing the color in there. And the satin just kind of blends that on top. We can put color on top of that shape and then blend that color in, or make the color opaque, so you can actually use this to colorize the content of a layer. Same thing with a gradient. We can put a gradient onto a layer just like that. We can choose any gradient from our gradient list. There we go. Of course, we can adjust the angle of the gradient as well. Make the gradient larger or smaller. So lots of options again in here. And we can fade the gradient in or out. So there's no gradient, and here is with a gradient. Let me bring the bevel and emboss back in again, and notice that these work together. So you can have multiples, bevel and emboss, gradient, a little drop shadow down there, all that stuff working together. We can overlay a pattern on top of that, on top of the gradient as well. And we can apply a stroke around the outside. There we go, there's the stroke. Real large stroke. It's on the outside. Let's put it centered over our line. There's outside and inside on that. So lots of options, lots of possibilities, a lot of things that you can do with these layer styles. So you should take some time to play with the layer styles. Again, they're right down here under this button. You can see the ones that are being used in here. I can show or hide these. Click on the little arrow right there. That shows or hides the layers being used on that. So they're available here, or they're available in the layer menu and layer styles right here. And again, when we're looking at the styles panel over here, these are simply sets of those layer styles.